following on from my previous review of the 1953 version of War of the Worlds, I will now discuss the 2005 remake of War of the Worlds, directed by Steven Spielberg and starring Tom Cruise. Now, I should say this was a film that I remember eagerly anticipating when it first came out. I was, such a fan of the 50s version. I think I saw this actually on the very first day that it was released in the UK back in 2005. That was not yesterday, I can tell you. I remember being very excited, and I remember seeing this film, and I remember being blown away by it the first time I saw it. I remember thinking it was great. I'd loved Spielberg films, so it really, to me, it felt like a natural successor to those earlier films, like Jaws and Jurassic Park and Close Encounters and what have you. My view has evolved slightly since 2005. I've watched the film more recently, and unfortunately for me, I think the film doesn't seem special to me anymore. It actually, it's a good film, I think, but only just. And for me, the flaws this time around were very, very, very visible. And I want to discuss that a little bit more. And as I said, it's frustrating because the good in this film is very, very good. There are a lot of really, really interesting things going on in this film, but again, unfortunately, there's just some things that, for me anyway, don't really hold up. So I'll start with the good, as I usually do. The setting of this film is obviously more up to date. Set in sort of New England in America. It's very much a film, as the original was a film in the shadow of the Second World War. This is a film in the shadow of 9/11. A lot of the visuals, a lot of the themes really seem like they come from a post 9/11 sort of more slightly paranoid American landscape, which is interesting. It's an interesting route to take, and I guess when you've got a film like this where it's destruction of the world and it was made in the early 2000s, it can't help but have those sort of connotations. So discussing the positives, I think the performances in this film are mostly strong. Tom Cruise knows how to carry a film. His performances aren't always stellar, but this is an example of a good performance from him. I think he's really, really trying, and it comes across well. He comes across as quite sympathetic. He comes across as an everyman, which not every performance of his does. I don't mind the relationship in the film between him and the children. I think they seem genuine. They do seem like a family unit. I dislike the Robbie character in the film, but I'll get into that later. But the Dakota Fanning is a talented child actress, and she does well in the film. So performances are fine. The setup of the film, as I said, is good. And I really, really like the decision to base the story on one family's experience of this alien invasion. One of my favourite films of all time is Signs, the M. Night Shyamalan film, which came 3 years before this. It was similar. It was one family's experience of this sort of extraterrestrial threat. You're not, it's not Independence Day. You're not going in and out of the White House and following all sorts of zany characters. The film does feel very down to earth. It feels very grounded, and I like that. I like that. I think that's refreshing because it's not just a disaster movie. It's a movie that does, in a lot of ways, it does feel authentic, which I quite like. Although I'll get into what I don't like about that later. I think there's a lot of good things set up that aren't necessarily paid off. I really, as I felt with the 50s version, I really like the production design of this film, especially with the tripods, as in the alien tripods. I think those things look really, really, really cool. Actually, I remember being it really captured my imagination when I first saw it in 2005. They look really menacing. Again, they're quite slow moving. They've got a lot. Every scene with them does carry a lot of suspense, and um, yeah, I just thought the design was really cool. The sound design as well, the way that they have it's almost like the Inception horn noise that they make when they go around. It just adds to that layer of sort of coolness and as in cold, like a clinical sense almost. In the way that when they first come up, they're sort of surveying everyone and just it really does carry that air of menace that needs to be carried. Um, and I think that aspect of the film was great. Um, the best scenes of the film, I think, are all within the first and second act of the film. Um, the scene where the tripod first emerges from the ground is near perfect. I really love it from a production design, from a direction perspective. I really do like it. Um, the other brilliant scene in the film is where Tom Cruise and his two kids are trying to board the ferry, and the tripods just sort of silently come from behind them. Perfectly executed. That scene is pure Steven Spielberg. Really love it. And there are some really great individual set pieces throughout the film that I really think are great. John Williams' score. This was one. I think this was one of John Williams' last great film scores. His career's kind of leveled off. I mean, I guess he's getting older. He probably doesn't. He probably can't really be bothered with this sort of stuff anymore. He probably just wants to retire. But this came out in 2005. This was one of John Williams' last great scores. It had such a layer of personality and suspense to the film that I think really, really works. And I think the score's actually worth listening to on its own. Is that good? Now, the cinematography is something that I'm going to get into in a minute. But what I will say is the film is exceptionally well shot. There's a lot of really creative sort of camera angles, a lot of really, really nice sort of one take shots throughout the film that look really complicated, really, really, really expertly crafted. I mean, Spielberg knows how to point the camera, he knows how to make the film engaging. And I mean, the scene that gets talked about, of course, is the one take camera shot where the camera like comes in and out of the car whilst Tom Cruise and the kids are driving. You know, it's like it comes out the windshield, it goes in through the window, and the car's going at like 50 miles an hour or something. And it's really, really ingenious. I don't know how they did it. But unfortunately, now this is where I segue into things I didn't like in the film. The cinematography overall for this film, and I mean more so lighting and the look of the film, not so much how it's shot. As I said, it's shot from a directorial, positioning of the camera perspective is fantastic. But the look of the film is something I really, really quite hate, to be honest. It was so the director of photography in this film was Janusz Kaminski, who Steven Spielberg has collaborated with later in his career. It started off with Schindler's List. They also collaborated with like Minority Report, Indiana Jones 4. I think Artificial Intelligence, Saving Private Ryan as well. And with the exception of Schindler's List, all of these films where the two of them collaborated look really bad. And the reason for this, I think, is based on Janusz Kaminski's preference for like bright white lights. So pretty much every scene in War of the Worlds has bright, like everything seems whited out. You know, like Tom Cruise will be talking and just everything behind him is white, like as if he's got like white spotlights playing behind him. And I just don't think it makes for a very nice aesthetic. And I guess it's stylistic, it's subjective. Maybe there will be people who do like this, but for me, it takes me out of the film a little bit because I really don't like it. And even in the better scenes of the film, that sort of white strobe effect is there, and I really don't get it. I think when Spielberg and Kaminski first collaborated with Schindler's List, that film was black and white. So I think having everything whited like that added a layer of texture to that film that worked for a black and white film and a dramatic film. It really added a layer of texture to it. But for War of the Worlds and for something even like Minority Report or Indiana Jones, it's not appropriate. I don't think it's too. I don't want to say it's too artsy because that's kind of lazy, but it almost is. It's not really appropriate for an action adventure thriller film. If you ask me, I think Spielberg had previously collaborated with Dean Cundey. That was one of his cinematographers of choice. They did Jurassic Park together. Dean Cundey also worked with Robert Zemeckis. He worked with John Carpenter. He was really good at framing like science fiction, horror, action adventure type films. It should have been Dean Cundey that was the director of photography here. I really think that would have added a layer of realism to the film, given it a bit more suspense and just been more appropriate, to be honest. But yeah, so the look of the film was something that I actively just did not like. But the main problem for me with it, and I thought about this quite keenly. The drama of the film that is set up just doesn't really pay off for me. So the film ostensibly is about Tom Cruise. He starts off as a kind of deadbeat dad almost, but through this, external threat, he learns to take charge as a dad and make decisions and be more assertive and things like that. But for me, that it doesn't really pay off because at the ending of the film, and again, I'm going to give this review a spoilers label. At the end of the film, Tom Cruise essentially reverts to square one. The film is all about him getting the. Now this is a plot thing. This is something they should have thought about when they're plotting the film. The film is all about Tom Cruise getting rid of his children. Essentially, he's like frustrated by them throughout. He obviously cares for them, but the whole film is about him getting the kids to Boston. Right? I think they start in New York, getting them to Boston so that he can lay them off on the parents. Oh, no, sorry, on their mum and the new husband. And for me, that doesn't really pay off very well. I don't think he really has an arc in the film. And again, this is all just these are problems with framing the story. The story takes place, but it was poorly conceived. I think this should have been something quite different. I thought about this. I was like, how could you improve this? And I think one of the things they could have done is at the end of the first act, so the aliens come, Tom Cruise and the kids get to the mother's house and they find that the mother and the stepdad are dead. I think that would have added a new layer of sort of tension and drama to things because it's not then going to be just we need to get to Boston so I can get rid of the children. It would be how do we build this relationship from something that's quite damaged into something that's going to survive through this apocalyptic event. So I think that would have been better. I mentioned earlier I really disliked the Robbie character, so his son, who just sort of inexplicably wants to go and join the army, even though he's 15. And that to me, that whole plot element just seemed kind of thrown in there. It seemed to me like they wanted to get rid of him from the story. And I just thought that was kind of stupid. I didn't really feel anything when the two of them, when Tom Cruise has to kind of let him go. I was just thinking, yeah, of course, let him go. He's being an idiot. Go and save the daughter, And then, of course, spoilers at the very end of the film when Robbie shows up again. He's not actually dead. I just kind of rolled my eyes. That just kind of sucked the tension out of the film. If you're not going to, for a film like this to be taken seriously, you need to take chances. You do need to kill characters off sometimes. And I think that for them just to sort of resurrect him inexplicably, he managed to come out of that big flaming ball of fire somehow. I thought was kind of stupid. The film is framed in a frustrating way. It's told in a frustrating way. The third act in the basement with Tim Robbins' character doesn't really work for me. That's where the film's narrative stalls. The first and second act are quite strong. The third act just kind of falls apart for me. It doesn't really have any narrative thrust behind it. There aren't really There's no drama there. I was actually this is going to be a weird thing to say. I actually think this film should have followed it should have taken inspiration from the classic comedy film Shaun of the Dead. Okay, and I know that's a weird comparison to make, but I did think of that when I was watching this film. I was like, they're focusing on the human drama. But the problem is, you get to the end of the film, Tom Cruise with his daughter and Tim Robbins. He doesn't know Tim Robbins. Tim Robbins is just like this crazy guy that he's met. So there's not really any sort of organic tension there between them. It's really just this is a thing we need to overcome. Um, and yeah, I think this is where the film pales in comparison to the 50s version because it just feels kind of low energy. There's not really any sort of deduction. There's not really any sort of drama or character arcs. Everyone just at the end of the film, everyone's just in the same sort of position as they were at the start of the film, and that to me didn't really work. And I guess it's subjective. I did like this film once upon a time, but just over time, these aspects of it, particularly the third act, the character stuff, it just doesn't really work as a story. However, I'm not going to disparage the film too much. As I said, overall, it is a good film. It's not a great film, but it is a good film. There is a lot of talent on show. It's Steven Spielberg. He knows how to make a film. Tom Cruise works fine as a main character, and you sympathise with him, even as it gets kind of stupid towards the end. You do, he does carry the film. You do sort of root for him. He's a fair enough protagonist. I love the design of the aliens. I love the music. It's a well edited film. Actually, it's well edited, and the camera work's quite crafty, and I quite like it. But I think where the film falls apart is really just in that third act, and really with the evolution of the story, and with a lack of sort of narrative thrust and a lack of serious drama as it goes on. So as a rating, I'm going to give War of the Worlds 2005 59 out of 100. It's good. Overall, it's passable. A rating over 50 means more good than bad. But to be honest, I would rather watch the 50s version than this, which I know to some people might seem crazy, but I earnestly would. I think the 50s version has more. It has a better pace to the story. It has more ideas, and overall, it's just a better film. But by all means, I think War of the Worlds 2005 is still worth checking out, if only just.